The failure of public schools to teach. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. If your kids are in public schools, then you cannot help but notice the failures of the public schools to adequately, properly teach your kids certain truths about America. Namely, American exceptionalism, putting America first. Instead, it's quite the opposite these days. Public schools are all about making sure your kids know that America is the evil of the world, and because of America, all the world's problems have gotten worse over time. And if you're sick and tired of this, well, this Bold and Blunt podcast is for you. And before I get into that, I want to quickly mention that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. That is the online platform for faith-based podcasts. Go there. Check out Bold and Blunt. Download Bold and Blunt. And of course, check out all the other great faith-based podcasts that are there as well. You can get Bold and Blunt anywhere podcasts are offered as well, and at washingtontimes.com. So if you're a parent in America, how sick and tired are you of the lies that children are being taught in America's public school systems? Your tax dollars right now are going to teach your kids how much to hate America, why to hate America, and how they should become good citizens of the globe, of the global community, and not the American community. That is unacceptable, because in a nation where children are being taught to hate the country in which they live and to look at themselves as citizens of the world, where is the future for a successful nation? Where is the hope for the nation's future? If you have kids that hate the country and that look at outlets like the United Nations or World Economic Forum, or World Health Organization, God forbid, as the proper governing organizations to get their marching orders from, to know how to govern, where's the hope for America? America, the sovereign nation, will crumble from within. And look, one example of this recently was just, it's in your face. If you watch Joe Biden's recent speech against the blood red background with the two Marines standing at parade rest while he delivered a hateful, vicious, divisive speech against half of America, practically, against conservatives in America in general, and MAGA type Americans specifically, if you watched that and came to the conclusion that, hey, that was a pretty good speech, chances are you're buying into the same type of propaganda that are being fed your kids' minds in public school systems. Let me just remind you about some of Joe Biden's hateful remarks. Listen up.
We must be honest with each other and with ourselves. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Now, I want to be very clear up front.
Remember, this is against that blood red background, except if you were a CNN watcher. Did you see the clip? Go to Jack Schneider's Twitter feed. It's at Jacob K. Schneider. Let me spell that out for you. At JACOBKSCHNEIDER. Okay, go to his Twitter feed and find this little clip that he posted from CNN. Halfway through Joe Biden's speech, CNN, he wrote on his tweet, tried to subtly alter the color of the background lighting, presumably to make it look less evil and creepy. And sure enough, if you click on that clip, it's a 17-second clip, and it starts out with the background in its truthful blood red color. And then within the course of 17 seconds, it fades to hot pink. The stripes on the American flag are a dead giveaway because those aren't true to color, but the bricks themselves definitely look hot pink. And as a comparison to red, you can see the CNN moniker in the bottom right-hand corner because CNN, you know, the live CNN, that's red itself. It's crazy. 17 seconds. They're trying to completely redo the imagery of the background of Joe Biden's speech. Why? Because in the days to follow this speech, that's what people were remarking upon, how very much it looked like a communist country government speech compared to a free society American speech. Mia Cathell at MIACATHELL caught the same clip. Watch the moment, she wrote on her Twitter feed. CNN slowly adjusts the camera settings when the blood red lighting behind dark Brandon, meaning Joe Biden, is looking a little too authoritarian. By the end, the stripes on the American flag are pinkish purple. And you know what? The bricks, they're just so hot pink. That is how CNN carries water for this communist in the White House right now. Let's go back to another one of his remarkable remarks at this speech.
Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
Okay, so what exactly is a MAGA Republican? Does Joe Biden even know? Because MAGA stands for Make America Great Again. And so when he says that he can work with Republicans, just not the MAGA Republicans, who is he referring to? Mitt Romney? Susan Collins? The Republicans? How about Adam Kinzinger? I bet he could work with Adam Kinzinger. So he's talking about the Republicans that are more like Democrats than they are conservatives. And when he's talking about MAGA Republicans, well, first off, let's put a number to it. 74 million, 75 million MAGA types voted for Donald Trump. Maybe more, depending on your views of the truthful election counts. But let's just lowball it. Let's just say 74 million Republicans can be considered MAGA Republicans because they specifically voted for Donald Trump in the 2020 election. Joe Biden says that we, and I'm going to go ahead and say we because I voted for Donald Trump, and I consider myself a MAGA Republican because I certainly want to make America great again and keep America great for the foreseeable future. So that means 74 million Americans Joe Biden dismisses that he can't possibly work with, that we are dangers to American society. Why? Because we believe in American exceptionalism, believe that America is the best country in the world, and believe that it's quite proper to believe that way and to want to keep America as the number one country in the world. I think his problem, Joe Biden's problem, his dissent, his opposition, is to the Constitution and the idea of God-given rights. I think he can work with some Republicans because there are some Republicans in the party who feel as if their jobs in office are to bargain and trade for certain rights for the citizens, not just who elected them, but the citizens of the entire nation. They don't see their job so much as upholding constitutional principles and specifically upholding the notion of limited government because their awareness is rooted in the fact that our individual rights already come from God. They don't buying into the idea that their job is to protect God-given rights for the citizen. They buy into the idea that they were elected to do business up on Capitol Hill with the Democrats and come to cooperative partnerships with the Democrats where they give a little, maybe win a little, give a little, get a little, and so forth. And in the end, citizens' rights are watered down. Those are the Republicans that Joe Biden can work with. And those are the Republicans that we don't need in the Republican Party. And those are the Republicans that Donald Trump, MAGA types, do not appreciate. So Joe Biden's big opposition here with MAGA Republicans are the ones who know that our country was built on the idea that rights come from God and that we don't need no stinking government telling us what rights we have because we already have the rights that government tries to pretend that they can give and or take as they will. We don't want the government in our homes, in our backyards, in our school systems even, except by taking the marching orders from the parents. And so back to the school systems. If you look at what's taking place there, the idea of critical thinking, the idea of constitutional restraints on government, the idea of American exceptionalism, these are all ideas that are being shown the front door. And instead, being ushered in are ideas like Joe Biden wants advanced. First and foremost, that America is just a piece of land like any other country, and that we need to partner with other countries of the world in order to decide what rights citizens can safely maintain. And secondly, that America's time is past, and maybe we need to work with countries like China and take lessons from China or become more European. Look at countries in Europe and become more like them, less individual in nature and much more collectivist. That is the agenda of the Democrat Party. That is the agenda of Joe Biden. And that's why Joe Biden hates MAGA Republicans, because we all know that we don't need a president telling us what rights we possess versus do not possess, because we already possess them. And Joe Biden, he is an employee. He is an employee of we the people, of we the MAGA type Republicans as well. And he doesn't like being reminded that he works for us, does he? Well, here's how this all circles back to public schools and what's being taught in the public school systems. Kids aren't being taught that. So kids, when they come out of high school, particularly if they go on to college where these anti-American ideas are really ingrained, they come out and they're beholden to the government for all their rights. They are thankful to the government for giving them this. They don't understand the concept upon which America was built, American exceptionalism, God-given rights. They think that's radical. They think that's radical, and it's really the Joe Biden type of narrative that's being advanced that is radical to the founding of this nation. But civics is not being taught in America's public school systems anymore, and that is a very big problem. Heritage Foundation, right, in June of 2021, wrote this piece based on a survey that the foundation conducted that went like this. Heritage Survey exposes civics education crisis. Parents and teachers must play greater role to help students understand America's founding, right? You don't even have to read the whole survey to get the gist. That's all truthful. That's exactly what America needs. Let me just read you one paragraph from this. The survey revealed that 2/3 of parents and nearly 3/4 of teachers share a strong desire to see, greater emphasis on civics education. High school had the largest interest, with 63% of parents and almost 74% of teachers saying civics education should be more emphasized. Amen to that. Amen to that. That is one quick and easy reform that we can implement in America's public school systems right now to have a dramatic effect on even next year's graduating class. So long as these teachers who agree on the importance of teaching civics in public schools aren't the socialist teachers that were put in place, put in the school systems by the likes of the Democrat Socialists of America. Right? We need teachers that have a strong pro-America, America first, American exceptionalism type of mentality teaching civics. That to the side, civics itself in public schools is something that when I was growing up, everybody, almost all public schools had it in place. It was a weeks-long class, months in some schools. Nowadays, it's been replaced by self-esteem training or social justice narratives and classes and so forth. Feel-good type of courses that do nothing for teaching kids about the importance of America on the world platform, but do plenty about making little Johnny and Janie understand why the things that they say on the playground may hurt the feelings of other people. So what is the solution here? Well, Connor Boyack, you may know the name. He is the creator of the Tuttle Twins series, which is an ongoing series, and he is one of the key fighters in the American culture right now, bringing forth some important books to teach young kids why America is so great, why founding fathers were so special, why the Constitution is so amazing, why the free market and capitalism is such a great economic and even cultural system. And he's here today on Bold and Blunt to talk more about the problems of the public education system and what teachers and parents, more specifically parents, can do to bring back a great pro-America type education to our society. Connor, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about civics in public school. Do public schools still teach civics any longer?
You know, they definitely teach civics, but just at a degraded quality, I would say, compared to what most parents expect or desire their children to learn. It's one thing to learn some of the superficial basics about the creation of the Constitution and our country, how it was formed. It's another thing to understand why it happened, and more importantly, how those debates and ideas relate to and apply to our world today. And that is what is missing in schools. There's no real modern context for this stuff. It's like we're drilling into kids' heads, what happened 250 years ago without helping them understand why it should matter to our world today.
So, of course, kids naturally think it's boring and history doesn't matter.
That's how young Connor felt years ago. I was the stereotypical kid who would raise my hand and say, why do we need to learn this? And I was told to put my hand down, it'll be on the test, you're supposed to learn it. But my teachers could or would never answer that question for me. So I grew up with a strong disinterest in history, almost a hatred. I really did not like memorizing who wrote what letter to who and when this debate happened and which battle was fought where and when. I didn't like the forced kind of pump and dump of having to cram this information in my head, take a test, and then I could just go on and forget it. That seemed almost like pedagogical torture to me, to have to endure that process. I loved learning, but I like so many other kids, I didn't like doing what I was told without any reason to the why. And so, as I now create these books for children, these Tuttle Twins books, all the time in my mind, I'm thinking, what would get young Connor to actually enjoy or love learning history? And the answer, it's really storytelling. It's not names and dates and facts. We love stories as kids, as adults. And history is a fun, amazing story if it's presented that way. It's just a tragedy that most of the textbooks out there and the curriculum that's being used, they're not using storytelling. It's just rushing through history with all these superficial factoids. That's why young Connor didn't like it. I think to the point of your question, that's why so many other kids are struggling to enjoy history today, is because we're teaching it the wrong way.
Yeah, I hated history in school as well, and I really didn't start getting an appreciation for American history in particular until I started using it in my research for media coverage. And I think I think you hit the nail on the head, that people want stories, and then from those stories, when the interest is already generated, then they start to care about dates and facts and things that you're tested on, correct?
That's right. It's all in the framing, and for me, it was after college. I started reading a few history books that presented history just through these grand stories of intrigue and controversy. I mean, it was like a soap opera or some kind of dramatic thing, and that's because it's reality. It's people's lives, and there's conflict and emotion, and history really comes alive when you present it that way. There's so many lessons in history that we need to draw from. We're all familiar with this quote: "Those who don't learn from the past are condemned to repeat it." The challenge that we face is that we're not teaching kids today to learn from the past. We're simply teaching kids about the past. And so from my vantage point, we end up repeating a lot of mistakes from the past that we could, as a society, avoid if only we learned from our history, drew those lessons out, and applied it to our world today. That is why I believe history is so critical to get right, to teach right, because we need to draw on those lessons to advance further as a society, to build upon the past, not have it be cyclical and go through it. But unfortunately, the books on the market today and so much of the curriculum is getting it wrong. So I believe through storytelling, we can inspire kids to love history and to pay attention to those ideas that can help them, they can apply those ideas to their life today and make better decisions as a result.
I want to talk about your Tuttle Twins series. As creator of Tuttle Twins, I think that's a phenomenal accomplishment. But I just want to touch on this one issue really quickly. Don't you think America's history in general should be resonating naturally with teenagers? Because if teenagers are kind of going through their rebel stage, what is more rebellious than the founding of America, right?
I don't disagree, and yet when you go, you can see these videos on YouTube, for example, where people will walk up to high schoolers and ask them like man-on-the-street questions about basic, civics or things about history, not unlike what Jay Leno used to do with his jaywalking segment, right? Going up and asking the average Joe, and of course these are selectively edited, and we like to laugh at the, ignorance of all these people who are recorded. And yet, the statistics in the surveys bear out what these anecdotal interviews show, and that is that these teenagers are not latching on to this stuff at all. So you would think, yes, that they might resonate with this idea of kind of anti-establishment rising up and throwing off the shackles of these, people, but it's not happening. The schools are not doing justice to this history. So I actually really strongly agree with the premise of your question, but we just don't see it borne out in schools across America.
That's because public schools in America have been infiltrated by socialists and Marxists, basically, through the teachers' unions. So it's no wonder that kids are being taught to hate America when they come out of public schools. And that's why your Tuttle Twins series is so crucially important. Talk about how you came up with that idea. Just talk about that project.
So Tuttle Twins was born in 2014 as a result of me as a dad wanting to teach my kids about, natural rights, property rights, free markets, kind of the American traditional values, classical liberalism of the Founding Fathers. And they were 5 and 3 at the time, so they were young. And I went on Amazon and searched for books that would help me talk to my kids about these concepts at a very kind of simplified level. Of course, there's books for everything, teaching the birds and the bees and potty training and anything you want to talk to your kids about. There were books for it, except for these types of economic and political and social ideas. So I spent a few weeks being bummed about that. There ought to be something. And then I realized, hey, you talk about entrepreneurship all the time. Here's an opportunity staring you in the face. So we vetted the idea. A friend of mine who became the illustrator, he also had kids, Elijah, and so we talked about this and said, let's give this a try. And so we did one book, not having any grand visions for what it would become today, but so many people bought that book, and to us that was a sort of a market signal that there were other parents like us who wanted to talk to their kids about these real-world concepts, help them understand the world they were becoming a part of, but that they lacked the ability to kind of know how to do that. How do you talk to a 6-year-old about socialism or an 8-year-old about eminent domain, or how do you do that? And for too long, conservatives and freedom lovers have waited until their kids were teenagers or adults, voting age, before they would really kind of talk to them about these serious ideas. But by then, kids have been exposed to teachers and textbooks and TikTok and all the rest, and they've been, impressed upon by very different people with different ideas, and those parents are like, wait, what happened to my kid? And so the Tuttle Twins is basically a vehicle through which parents can share their values, talk about their values with their kids, have a common language, read some fun stories, have some amazing family discussions, really just to spark these conversations in families about important ideas happening in our world today.
Is it a completed set now, or is it an ongoing campaign, ongoing project? And if the latter, what do you have coming up for the stories?
So it is very much ongoing. What started with children's books have now expanded into, board books for toddlers, like the ABCs of Liberty and the 1, 2, 3s of the Bill of Rights. And also books for teenagers, some are modeled after the familiar Choose Your Own Adventure stories from the 90s, where you could kind of pick the path that you wanted to go. So we have some stories that follow that model. We also have guidebooks that teach critical thinking and entrepreneurship for teenagers. So what we're trying to do is basically build a content empire where no matter the age of your child and how they like to learn, there's going to be something for them. We've got a cartoon series that recently came out, and a podcast and a game and curriculum. So this is very much an ongoing project where for children of all ages and learning style preferences, we're creating content so that mom and dad can say, hey, my kids would really love to watch a cartoon in the morning, and then we can talk about it. Or my kids love outdoor projects. Let's do some of the activities together. We want to create this vast array of resources and materials to empower parents to talk to their kids about these important values.
Now, some states or some communities around the nation, especially in Florida, right, because that's the state that makes the headlines, are pushing back against some of these teachings in America's in public school systems that could be seen as detrimental to youth in terms of providing a truthful view of America's founding. Do you see that backlash from Republicans in particular spreading across America?
I do see it spreading. There's definitely concern as a result of things like critical race theory, 1619 Project, the teachers who share this type of worldview now dominating in schools, teaching civics and social studies throughout the country. The question I ask to parents who have these concerns is, what are you going to do about it? It's not enough to, police the schools and what books are being used in libraries and so forth. It's not enough to make sure your children are shielded from the bad stuff. You have to be very intentional about teaching the right stuff, about teaching truth, about not assuming that, the teacher at your local school is going to know, the right narrative or teach the values that you share. That is precisely why we've created a new American history book for the Tuttle Twins, so that these parents can say, well, I know my kids might be learning some stuff I don't agree with or that isn't true in the schools, but here at home, we're going to supplement that. We're going to counteract it. We're going to read things, that are teaching true principles. And so that, for us, we're very popular with the homeschool community who uses Tuttle Twins like as a curriculum. But half of our audience, their kids are in public, private, or charter school. And to them, it is that kind of counter agent in the home where, hey, I know my kids might be learning some crazy stuff at school, but I'm going to make sure they're learning the right stuff at home.
Critical race theory has become such a lightning rod, and I'm just curious, do you think CRT is inherently flawed, or do you think it's flawed insofar as it's the only presented view in public school systems?
I think it's flawed because of the motives of those who propose it. Take a gun, for example, a simple object. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. It's really the motive of those individuals who are wielding the gun. I I don't think it's wrong to talk about problems dealing with slavery and some of the, inequities that have existed previously and might still exist today. I think those can be productive discussions. Unfortunately, I think the vast majority of the people who advance these critical race theory narratives have a certain agenda. For them, it's not about this fair and balanced, rational discussion about race issues. It is about, reparations. It is about punishing white people. It is about undermining the kind of classical liberal tradition of the founding fathers and therefore today's America as well. When you look at the people tearing statues down, it's not that they, hate Thomas Jefferson or George Washington. It's not even that they were, bigoted, slave-owning white supremacists, as these people might say. So many of the people behind the tearing down of the statues and proposing these kind of ideologies in classrooms, for them it is about disconnecting America from that classical liberal tradition. A lot of these people are socialists, Marxists, progressives. They know that by attacking the individuals who kind of created our country, flawed though they were, they can also then attack the ideas for which they stood and therefore more easily advance their political agendas today. So I tell parents, I say, if you don't recognize that your children are in an ideological battlefield, that their minds are ground zero, then you've already lost, right? You will lose every war that you don't know you're even fighting. And so you have to have eyes wide open and realize there are people with agendas out there trying to push them in the schools, in the classrooms, in the libraries. Right or wrong, they exist. And so you need to at least be aware of these elements. You need to be aware of these trends so that you can then come up with a plan to defend your child against them, shield them from some of those attacks, empower them to fight back, teach them critical thinking and how to evaluate these ideas and how to challenge things logically. Like, these can be very empowering things as we send our kids out into the world. Too many parents have just assumed the best, sent their kids off to school, and washed their hands of it. I say to parents, no, you got to take, that power back. You have to be very intentional here if you want your children to kind of survive ideologically in the world you're sending them into.
Yeah, and critical thinking is usually one of the first casualties of public school systems, it seems like. Our time is coming to an end, but I did want to quickly mention your new book, America's History, 1225 through 1776. Talk a little bit about it and how people can get it.
Well, thank you. This book is born of 2.5 years of research into how history is being taught in the schools today. We bought all of the popular social studies books used in schools across the country, and all of them are fantastic at teaching those superficial factoids, the dates, the names, the battles, and so forth. But none of them, literally none of them, taught history in a way that helps kids in 2022 or 3 or 4 understand why what happened 250 years ago should matter to their world today. It's like we're walking kids through an American History Museum and say, oh, look, they used to dress like this. Oh, look, they used weapons like this. All right, let's go to the cafeteria. It's a very passing, quick, review through history. So our Tuttle Twins book, it's a 240-page storybook. The whole thing is a story. We're teaching American history, but most importantly, we're teaching it in a way where we explain throughout the book why all these ideas matter to our world today, how we can learn from what happened 250 years ago and empower kids today to make better decisions and shape a better world. And so we just launched this a few weeks ago for the 4th of July. We've got companion curriculum and activities and an audiobook and videos, and trying to really empower these parents to say, if we want our kids to learn from the past, we have to teach them in a way where they can actually do that, where we show them how to learn from the past and apply it to the future and to our present today. So it's at TuttleTwins.com/history, where folks can get the whole bundle. And this, for us, is the first of what we hope to be a 4-volume series as we continue on through the timeline. But we're starting with kind of that early American all the way up to the Revolution, and it's at TuttleTwins.com/history.
Wow, 2.5 years of research. That sounds great. I'm definitely going to pick up a copy, not just for my kids, but for myself. It sounds very fascinating and a must read. Connor, I really want to thank you for the work you do to preserve American history, and thank you for being on Bold and Blunt. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
If we don't start teaching our kids, our younger generations, to love America, love American exceptionalism, and more importantly, love freedom as it's rooted in individualism, we're just going to lose our country. It doesn't matter what China does, doesn't matter what Russia does. We'll just crumble from within. And we are at that fork in the road right now. You know it. I know it. We can all feel it. This is why Democrats are just so open with their evil right now. They just feel that America is about to crumble from within, and they can't stop their lusts. They can't stop their demonic lusts to hurry up and crumble America before Joe Biden leaves office. Because once Biden is gone, really once the midterms come around, honest elections will bring a great Republican majority. But they know their time is short, and so they feel this is their time. And it's not time to let up. It's time to fight, but it's also time to educate the next generation so we're not in this panic mode at the 12th hour clanging gong in the foreseeable future of America. We'll have a steady path of freedom upon which we can walk if our younger generations are properly educated about America. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for faith-based podcasts. You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are offered, including WashingtonTimes.com. Go there, sign up for my newsletter, get my commentaries and my Bold and Blunt podcast delivered straight to your email box. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are my newsletter days, and Tuesday and Thursdays are my podcast days. And one more quick note, if you want to learn more about the horrors of this far leftist overreach into individual God-given freedoms, pick up a copy of my latest book. It is called Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. It's available now at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, or on my own website, CherylChumley.com. Thank you so much for being a Bold and Blunt listener. I appreciate your support. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.